Punishments today often involve prison sentences or fines, but in the ancient world, justice was a far more brutal and horrifyingly creative affair. Back then, breaking the rules didn't just strip one of their freedom, it stripped them of their very humanity. Imagine being boiled alive, set on fire for a tyrant's amusement, or stretched until every bone in your body shattered. These were the grim fates awaiting those who stepped out of line. Join us in this video as we explore 12 insane punishments from the ancient world. Number 12. Brazen Bull. The brazen bull was one of the most horrifying torture devices ever created. It was invented in ancient Greece by a man named Perillos of Athens during the reign of a tyrant called Phalaris, who ruled over the city of Akragas, modern-day Agrigento in Sicily. This device was not only brutal, but also a symbol of the extreme cruelty of some rulers in history. The brazen bull was a hollow statue made entirely of bronze and shaped like a large bull. It was designed to be both a method of execution and a terrifying spectacle. The victim would be forced inside the bull through a small door on its side. Once the person was locked inside, a fire would be lit underneath the statue. The bronze would quickly heat up, and the person inside would be roasted alive. The design ensured that the bull would reach high temperatures, making the execution extremely painful and slow. What made the brazen bull even more disturbing was the way it was designed to amplify the victim's suffering. Inside the bull, there were pipes and acoustic mechanisms that transformed the screams of the person being burned into sounds resembling the bellowing of an actual bull. This gruesome feature added an element of theatricality to the execution, making it both a punishment and a spectacle for onlookers. The idea was to entertain the ruler and his court while instilling fear in anyone who dared to oppose him. The legend of the brazen bull doesn't end with the torture itself either. According to historical accounts, the creator of the device, Perillos, met a cruel fate himself. After presenting the brazen bull to Phalaris, he was reportedly tricked into climbing inside to demonstrate how it worked. Once inside, Phalaris ordered his men to light a fire beneath the bull, giving Perillos a taste of his own invention. However, some stories say that Phalaris didn't kill him entirely, pulling him out before he died, only to execute him later by other means. Ironically, Phalaris himself didn't escape the cruelty of his time. He was overthrown by his enemies, and some accounts suggest that he too was executed using the brazen bull. While the brazen bull surrounds the victim with fire, the next punishment involves a hot substance being inside the person instead. You will see what hard to look. Number 11. Molten gold. History suggests that both the Romans and the Spanish Inquisition may have used this brutal method more often than we know. These were societies unafraid of inventive cruelty, and molten gold became their ultimate weapon for making a gruesome statement. The process was shockingly simple, yet utterly horrifying. The victim would first be tied down, ensuring there was no chance of escape or resistance. Then their mouth was forced open, leaving them powerless as the molten gold was poured directly down their throat. There was no mercy, no second chances, just the searing agony of liquid fire. The effects were as horrific as you'd imagine. The burning gold tore through the body, causing catastrophic damage to internal organs. The lungs blistered from the heat, and death came quickly, but not before the victim's body bore the devastating marks of this unimaginable punishment. And yet, human cruelty didn't stop with molten gold. When fire wasn't the instrument of torment, water took its place. Number 10. Keel hauling. For sailors at sea, few things were as terrifying as the punishment of keel hauling. It wasn't just a brutal act. It was a calculated ordeal meant to instill fear and enforce discipline. Reserved for offenses like theft or violent outbursts, keel hauling turned the open ocean into a stage for slow and agonizing punishment. The process began with the accused being bound hand and foot, their limbs secured to a rope that stretched beneath the ship from one side to the other. Once tied, they were thrown overboard, left to the mercy of the crew. The next moments depended entirely on the mood of those handling the ropes. If they chose to be lenient, a sailor might be pulled quickly, suffering cuts and bruises, but avoiding the worst. But mercy was rare. More often, the condemned was dragged slowly along the ship's keel. The sharp, barnacle-encrusted underside, each inch tore at their skin, slicing into flesh and leaving a trail of blood in the water. Surviving even a single round was a gamble. As they were pulled, their bodies slammed into the keel with bone-breaking force. The barnacles added an extra layer of agony, shredding flesh like a rusty blade. And let's not forget the drowning. Each pull on the rope dragged them underwater, leaving barely enough time to gasp for air before going under again. If someone did manage to survive the first pass, a rare miracle, their fate wasn't much brighter. Option 1, they'd be sent for another round, almost guaranteeing death. Option 2, they'd be hauled back aboard, where they'd slowly succumb to infections from their shredded skin. Option 3, they'd live, but their scar-covered body would be a permanent reminder of their ordeal. Life wouldn't be easy for these survivors, mocked and shunned by others who saw their scars as badges of shame, leaving behind the horrors beneath the water's surface. We now turn to a fate even more unsettling, where the condemned are suspended in the open air, their slow decay a public spectacle for all to witness. Number 9, hanging in chains. Back in the early 1900s, Afghanistan saw the last recorded use of something truly chilling, an old punishment method that most would rather forget. This story only came to light in 1921, when National Geographic featured a photograph that sent shivers down many spines. Interestingly, this wasn't just an Afghan thing. Way back in the 17th and 18th centuries, the United States dabbled in it too. One case happened in Boston, Massachusetts, where a group of pirates was left dangling at the Boston Harbor. The sight was meant to scare off any sailors who dared to approach with bad intentions. And then there's England, a country that seemed to have a special fondness for this gruesome practice. They used it on all sorts: traitors, thieves, murderers, and pirates. But things got even darker after 1752, thanks to the Murder Act. This law required convicted murderers to face either public dissection or a gruesome fate known as gibbeting. Over 134 unlucky souls met this end, and gibbeting quickly became the go-to punishment. Here's how it worked. The most common type of gibbet was a metal cage, custom-made to fit snugly around the person's body. Once locked in, the poor soul was hoisted 30 feet or more above the ground, usually near busy roads or water sources. This was done to send a clear message: break the law, and this could be you. Imagine heading to the local well for water and finding yourself face to face with a dying man pleading for just one sip. Disturbing, right? The horror didn't end there, though. Once the condemned finally passed, their bodies were left to rot in the cages. For years, locals had to deal with the smell of decay so strong it kept them awake at night. Complaints piled up, but the bodies often stayed there, forgotten, until some government official finally decided to do something about it. Some of these skeletons hung there for over 20 years before anyone got around to cleaning them out. While gibbeting left a body to decay in plain sight, the next punishment stripped away something far more primal, layer by agonizing layer. Number 8. Flaying. Flaying or skinning was a punishment designed not just to cause pain, but to completely break a person's spirit. It wasn't a quick death. Instead, it was a slow and excruciating process meant to leave a lasting impression on everyone who saw it. The victim was stripped of their clothes, tied tightly to prevent any movement, and left completely vulnerable. The executioner would then use a sharp blade to begin peeling away the skin, often starting at the head, where the pain was most intense. This process was slow and deliberate. The skin wasn't just cut away, it was carefully pulled off piece by piece while the victim remained conscious. To make the process easier, parts of the body were sometimes heated just enough to soften the skin, allowing it to be removed more smoothly. The smell of burning flesh mixed with the victim's cries added to the horror. Death didn't come quickly. Some victims died from shock or blood loss, while others succumbed to infection or hypothermia, which could take hours or even days. The flayed body was then displayed as a warning to others, its raw, exposed muscles serving as a gruesome reminder of the power of those in charge. It was a punishment meant to instill fear, leaving an unforgettable message carved into flesh. If you thought flaying was horrific, the ancient Persians had a punishment even more terrifying. Number 7. Scaphism. Scaphism was a punishment so cruel it seemed almost unreal, designed to deliver one of the slowest and most agonizing deaths imaginable. The process began with the prisoner, often someone guilty of murder, being placed in a wooden boat or hollow log with holes cut for their arms and legs to stick through. Once they were strapped in, the true torment began. They were force-fed a mixture of honey and milk until their stomachs were painfully bloated. Then their entire body was